Wow, the left-wing lunatics are throwing their handbags at each other and are eating each other alive, as it looks as though there is going to be major changes to the UK's open border policy. The Home Secretary Shabanna Mahmood, of course, announced in her statement new reforms to the asylum system, and whilst most certainly not perfect and whilst 100% not complete in my personal opinion, I do believe that we need to be stopping the boat. For a Labour government, and looking at the state of this country over the last couple of years and our broken system, it's a right step in the right direction. However, I must add, it isn't totally done, in my personal opinion. However, the left-wing Liberals, as expected, are not happy with this. They want the country to continue to be open borders and allow anyone to just come into the country. One of them attacks Shabanna Mahmood, and Shabanna Mahmood goes off the rails. She even swears and gets told off by the Deputy Madam Speaker as well. It's pretty ferocious, ladies and gentlemen, but they are all eating each other alive. The lefties are fighting each other, and it's pretty glorious to watch. As always, guys, we are going to be watching this footage, but first, please do hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for more.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is right that the government is looking for ways to bring order to the asylum system. It was left in total disarray by the Conservatives. Sadly, the government has been too slow to act. Britain has a long and proud history of responding with compassion to people fleeing unimaginable horrors. That should continue in a way that is fair and sustainable. So we welcome some of what the Home Secretary has said on that score. But what is not helpful is the Home Secretary claiming that the country is being torn apart by immigration. Acknowledging the challenges facing our nation is one thing, but stoking division by using immoderate language is quite another. I will, however, welcome news about safe and legal routes. This is something the Liberal Democrats have called for some time, since they were scrapped by the Conservatives, leading to more small boat crossings. But we do have some concerns about the far-reaching detail behind these proposals, which seems to be missing. The Home Secretary is revoking the legal duty to provide asylum seekers with accommodation and says asylum seekers should support themselves and contribute to our society. But she is still banning them from working so they can support themselves, contributing to our society. That makes no sense at all. She relies a lot on Denmark as an example. Denmark lets asylum seekers work after 6 months. So will she. And can she guarantee that the burden to house asylum seekers won't fall on already struggling local councils? And can she guarantee that we won't see a whole-scale transfer of asylum seekers from hotels to the streets? And if the Minister for Border Security and Asylum announced to the media asylum seekers could have jewellery confiscated, is the Home Secretary doing this to raise money or to deter people? And either way, does she acknowledge that many British people will see it as unnecessary and cruel? State-sponsored robbery will certainly not fix a system that costs taxpayers £6 million every day in hotel bills. If the government plans to keep its promise to end hotel use, it must also process the claims of the 90,000 backlog of asylum seekers. Something the Liberal Democrats have a plan to do within 6 months using Nightingale-style processing centres. Does the Home Secretary seriously believe that an overstretched Home Office, which has yet to clear the existing backlog, can also undertake reviews of every refugee's status every 2.5 years? The UK must continue to lead international efforts to manage large migratory flows, and because the flow of people comes from Europe, she will need to work with the EU on a solution. The Oxford Migration Observatory has identified a clear Brexit effect. That means people refused asylum in the EU now make a second attempt here, a consequence of the Brexit delivered by the Conservatives and the honourable member for Clacton 2. The Minister refused to answer earlier whether Brexit has harmed our immigration and asylum system. So I'll ask the Home Secretary now, does she think that Brexit has made it easier or more difficult for this country to control its borders and asylum system? And does she think reductions in overseas development spending will reduce or increase migratory flows? We have already made it very clear that we think leaving the ECHR will make no difference to securing our borders and will tear hard-won rights away from British people. It's encouraging that the Home Secretary has said that is not part of the government's plan. Finally, we urge the government to tread carefully, to act with fairness, to act with efficiency, and to act with compassion for local communities in the UK who want this resolved, but also for asylum seekers too.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I wish I had the privilege of walking around this country and not seeing the division that the issue of migration and asylum system is creating across this country. Unlike him, unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called a fucking packy and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become in our country. And I do say to him, I wish it were possible to say that there isn't a problem here, that there's nothing to see and that it is all, in fact, just extremist, right-wing talking points. But this system is broken and it is incumbent on all members of Parliament to acknowledge how badly broken the system is and to make it a moral mission to fix this system so that it stops creating the division that we all see. And I do say to him, I do not think it is acceptable or appropriate for people in this place to not acknowledge the real experience of those who sit outside of this House. We are supposed to be in here to reflect that experience in this House, and I hope that he will approach the debates that we will no doubt have on all of these measures in that spirit. He also accused this government of being too slow to act. I do have to say to him, removals of those who have no right to be in our country are up by 23% in the first 18 months of this Labour government compared to the last 18 months of that former Tory government. That is a government that is getting on with the job. We have made 11,000 enforcement raids, 8,000 arrests, and over 1,000 people with no right to be in this country as a result of those raids have been removed from this country. This is a government that has been getting on with the job, and this is just the next phase of our work as we deal with the broken migration system that we inherited from those opposite. He said that he thought that whilst people who are waiting on their claim should be given the right to work, I think he knows that would be a huge pull factor and increase the number of channel crossings rather than decrease them. That would be our experience in this country. That is why we are not pursuing that policy. But what we have said is for those who are granted refugee status in this country and who can and want to, they will be able to switch into the protection work and study route so they can start contributing to society. That will help them to integrate and it will help the communities that they are living in as well. He knows full well that it is not the policy of this government to confiscate jewellery from those who are accessing asylum accommodation. What I would say to him, though, is asylum accommodation is provided to asylum seekers by British taxpayers, and it is right that if people have high-value assets, that they contribute to the cost of that asylum accommodation. I gave in my speech the example of a man who was in supported asylum accommodation paid for by his taxpayers and by mine, who was receiving £800 a month from his family and who had enough money to acquire himself an Audi. I think it is right that the British state should be able to say to such an individual, contribute. We're not saying that we would take everything away and leave that individual destitute, but I think contribution is a fair principle here. And I would be very disappointed to discover that the Liberal Democrats do not support contribution when people can afford to do so to the cost of their asylum accommodation. And Madam Deputy Speaker, he left his remarks on Brexit. I don't have any more to say about that. I'm living in the world as it is today. If he has things to say, I'm sure the House will continue to hear about them.
The Home Secretary should know that language that is not acceptable in this House does not become acceptable if it is attributed to others. She might like to apologise for the language used.
I apologise, Madam Deputy Speaker. I did not mean any discourtesy. I was merely reflecting the truth of words that are used to me.
And I think we all appreciate that. But please, can I urge members to keep their language acceptable in the House? Graham Stringer.